Hi St. Veronica's, this is Mrs. McGovern and I'm here today to talk to you about the 2018-2019 Science Fair. Now that we're well under our way, we have our testable questions, our intros, and our hypothesis done, I want to go ahead and talk to you and the parents about what to expect on the road ahead. Many people ask, why do you even do a science fair? It's so much work. Well, it's just really a great opportunity to spark kids' interest in science. They get the chance to explore an area of science they otherwise might not get to do in our regular curriculum. It also gives them a chance on their own to walk through the scientific method. So we do that in our labs here in class, but not to a point where someone will have to plan and actually conduct an experiment on their own, analyze the results, and come up with a conclusion. So this really is a great chance for them to do that. It also is really a super opportunity for a cross-curriculum exercise. So this year we're really able to do that with Google Classroom. The reading teachers and English teachers are helping us look at how they write their research and cite those in MLA format. The library teacher has helped us with our research portion of this exercise. As I mentioned, the computer teacher, she's going to help them make their graphs and their data tables. The art teacher is going to help them start the plan and design their boards and actually use class time to work on those boards. So we're trying to do more of the science fair here in class so that less has to be done at home and incorporate the project across all disciplines. So I think it's going to be really wonderful this year. It also teaches them a lot about planning, organizing, and executing this mission. So I develop a timeline for the students, but it's their job to stick to that and budget their time within those time constraints. And really, we're all learning organization skills as they go along, and they get their folder and they have to organize data tables, etc. Really great opportunity. It also is a super way to foster self-assessment and evaluation. They look at their scores each week and say, okay, what do I need to do better next week to really boost my score, or how can I revise that to make it even better? And then at the end of the project, they look back and say, well, what could I do next year that may be even more fun and more interesting now that I've accomplished this? It also stimulates healthy competition here within 6th, 7th, and 8th grade and 5th grade, I apologize. Each grade level gets a 1st, 2nd, and 3rd place prize at the science fair, and 7th and 8th graders have the opportunity to go on to compete in the Diocese Science Fair. And it really helps promote our STEM programs. We have friends and family come visit the day of the science fair, and pre-K through 4th grade come to see all of the 5th through 8th grade projects, and it's just a really fun time for everybody to get into science. So what must be accomplished for this big science fair project? 4 things. First, they are going to have to do their own experiment and create a data log to reflect that information. They're going to write a science fair paper, which we are going to work on in little pieces and chunks as we go along. They'll also do a display board. As I mentioned, we'll start that in the art classroom and they'll finish that up at home. And 5th, oral presentation. Really want to work on those public speaking skills. As I've told them, Steve Jobs was a master communicator, convinced everybody that they needed that iPhone, but he was a scientist. So being able to convey your ideas or complex things in a very simple manner is an art that we want to work on here in science class. Tools that we are going to need students to have include computer access. If you do not have a computer at home, I do allow students to stay in during recess lunch to work on their documents in Google Classroom, but we really do encourage everyone to try to have computer access at home. Towards the end of the project, they will need a printer with cartridges so that they can print out their papers. They need a camera as they do the experiment in December so that they can take pictures while they do the experiment and display their results on their trifold board. They also need rulers, scissors, pencils, glue sticks, other experiment supplies that they come up on their individual material list, and whatever special effects they want to have on their display board. So please just be advised, we will need some tools and supplies to accomplish this project. Organization is absolutely key, and I hope that is one of the main learning points that students take away from this project. Every student has received one of these green folders, and on the front it should say their name and science fair. So please be looking for this folder in your houses. The second page lists our timeline from now through February 20th, when it is the actual science fair, so that they can see step by step what they have to manage along the way. Now, each part is graded as a separate assignment, and they're weighted differently. I will address that at the end of this. In the science fair folder, after the timeline, they have what's called the science fair workbook. And this is where they're writing down the actual information for their individual project. So they wrote their top 3 questions that they might be interested in, their testable question, and they stated the purpose of their project. They then looked up 4 sources, wrote down the source information and 3 to 4 facts of those. We'll go on this next week. After the hypothesis and variables, we are now writing procedures and materials. So that is for their individual project. Now I have tabs 1 through 10 here, which are our mini lessons. So each week during science, I take time out to go over a mini lesson. And I will explain those in just a minute. Then we also have it organized on Google Classroom so that they are working off of one Google Doc, and then I post the assignments there on Google Classroom as well. If you would like a summary of their Google work, please let me know and I can invite you as a guardian. So for the mini lessons, these have turned out to be really great learning points so that everybody understands each stage of the science fair process. So we started out writing, what is a testable question? It's not a yes or no question, it's not an opinion, it's a how question. If you have a how question, then you're gonna do an actual experiment to figure out how and why something happens the way it does. We had background research, then we flipped over to identifying variables and hypotheses, which we did all this week, and next week we're moving on to writing a step-by-step procedure and really a detailed list of materials so that anybody can do your project. By accomplishing those mini lessons each week with practice, we then flip to the front of their actual workbook and they complete a written draft in class. This entire folder at the end of the project will be a grade in itself as their rough draft, in addition to the final draft on Google Classroom. So other mini lessons we'll be going over are creating a data table and conducting the experiment. We will be going over graphing and summarizing results, finalizing their research, the MLA format, writing their conclusion, writing acknowledgments, thanking their parents for their support, and the abstract, and creating the display board. So although it is an ongoing project, we really break it down into 10 manageable mini lessons. For the paper itself, this is a general timeline of how we break that paper down. The cover, table of contents, and abstracts that are at the very beginning, we actually save those for the end once they've accomplished everything else. This yellow is a little difficult to see. It says introduction purpose, their hypothesis and research. We started that in October. We'll go back and revise it again in January. The November timeframe, we're coming up with the experiment design, the materials, procedures, and creating the data table before they do their experiment. In January, we'll come back and we'll create graphs to reflect their results. In January, we'll also do the analysis, practical applications, and conclusions, and then the works cited and acknowledgments. So really, 80% of this is completed before Christmas break. December 20th is when their the experiment is done. January is the analysis, conclusion, and polishing it up for its final draft. And then February is our actual science fair. So here's a general timeline where we're taking it one step at a time and how each of the assignments is weighted. Their introduction and question was a homework grade. Their initial research, because that did take more time and they had to find 4 actual assignments, by October 19th, that was a quiz grade. This last week, they had to identify variables and come up with their hypothesis as well as their reasoning, homework grade. Their procedures and materials would normally be a homework grade, but we're taking time out to also go back and revise these first 4 sections. So that is actually going to be a project test grade and count as the first draft of their paper, so that they don't have to come back to those portions of the paper. Next, they will create a data table. By November 20th, then we'll have a month without much talk of the science fair and science class, because they'll be conducting their experiment at home on their own. They need to complete at least 3 trials so that they know that first one to confirm the results of the first trial. When we come back from Christmas break, we will then do some additional research, write their conclusion, their abstract, and conduct final revisions. Once we're done with the paper, then we'll work on the display board. So I strongly encourage people not to get a jump start on their display board. If they like art, there's a tendency to do that. And then for their actual presentations to class, I apologize, everyone will present to the class. Is actually everyone's favorite week of science class the entire year. And then the following week, we will present to the judges for the St. Veronica's Science Fair. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me at school, or if students have questions, please do feel free to ask me during class. Right? Thank you. Bye-bye.